All right, let's dive into a story that is part police scandal, part straight-up mystery. We're talking about an officer who gets fired in a very public way, but whose professional history seems to have been, well, deliberately scrubbed from existence. His name is Brandon Beak.
So here's the setup. Back in March of 2007, Officer Brandon Beak, along with 6 other officers from the Inglewood Police Department, was fired. And look, this wasn't some quiet, behind-the-scenes resignation. This was a huge deal, the result of a major internal investigation that made headlines. It was supposed to be a massive purge, a sign that things were changing.
But this is where the story starts to get really strange. You'd think for someone fired in such a public way, the paper trail would be a mile long. But today, it's nearly impossible to find out what he actually did. Almost all the official traces have just vanished, which brings up a pretty chilling question. What does it take to completely erase a police officer's past?
To understand how a record gets erased, we first have to figure out what was on it in the first place. So let's go back and look at the specific events that led to Beak's spectacular downfall.
And man, things unraveled for him, and they unraveled fast. It seems to have started with an incident in December 2006. By February, a full-blown internal investigation is underway. And then just 1 month later, boom, Beak is gone. It was a swift, decisive move meant to show everyone they were cleaning house. Now, the official story that went out was that these officers were fired for visiting massage parlors. But what the internal investigation actually found was way, way more serious. We're talking about major violations of the California Penal Code, things like soliciting prostitution, pimping, and pandering. And that last one, covering for other officers, well, that points to a whole other level of conspiracy and obstruction of justice.
But here's the thing. To really get what was happening, you have to zoom out. Beak's case wasn't just some isolated incident, nope. It was a symptom of an entire police department that was in a full-blown crisis.
Just to give you an idea of the scale of the problem here, between 2003 and 2008, Inglewood Police shot and killed 11 people. And of those 11, 5 of them were unarmed, almost half. So we're not talking about a few bad apples here. This was a clear pattern, and it was the kind of environment officers like Beak were working in.
And the cost to the city? It was staggering. You know who was footing the bill for all this misconduct? Taxpayers. We're talking massive settlements. One single case ended up costing the city $8.6 million. That's a huge red flag showing just how much of a liability the department had become.
The violence really hit a peak in 2008. I mean, just look at this. The department had 4 fatal shootings in just 4 months, and 3 of those victims were unarmed. With that kind of thing happening, you can imagine that public trust was hitting absolute rock bottom. It got so bad that the federal government had to step in. The Department of Justice launched what's called a pattern and practice investigation. And let me tell you, this isn't just some minor review. This is the big one. It's a top-to-bottom federal inquiry that they only do when they think a police department has systemic problems so deep that it's violating people's constitutional rights. So the city's response was to bring in a reformer, a new chief of police named Jacqueline Zebrooks, and her mission was crystal clear: clean house, force accountability, and completely rebuild the department's culture from the ground up. But even as all these reforms were supposedly starting, a totally different effort was happening behind the scenes. An effort that wasn't designed to fix the past, but to completely erase it. And this, right here, is where the cover-up becomes undeniable. You just have to look at the timing. So, Beak gets fired way back in 2007. Then, years later, in late 2018, the city of Inglewood suddenly destroys hundreds of police misconduct records. Why then? Well, it just so happened to be a few weeks before a new transparency law, SB 1421, was set to take effect, a law that would have made those exact files public. The timing is just unbelievable. Now, you can shred a document, but some things leave a mark you can't get rid of. And one record that couldn't be erased was Brandon Beak's name on the Brady list. This is a confidential list that prosecutors keep. It's basically the list of cops whose past conduct is so shady that they can't be trusted on the witness stand. Being on that list is a permanent stain. So, after the huge scandal, the firings, and the very intentional shredding of records, what's even left? What does the ghost of Brandon Beak's career look like today when you try to find it? You just hit dead end after dead end. The digital trail for the former Inglewood officer has gone completely cold. Seriously, if you do a deep search for Brandon Beak online,
you're more likely to end up on this guy's profile, a totally unrelated Canadian retail worker who just happens to have the same name. It's a perfect example of how completely the real story got buried.
And this lack of information creates a vacuum where you get two completely different stories. On one hand, the official narrative is that his career ended abruptly in 2007. But then a source connected to the case claims something much more disturbing, that the department secretly hired the fired officers back, destroyed the files to cover their tracks, and that Beak still works there. And without the records, it's impossible to know what's true.
So with his professional life just a big cloud of mystery and contradiction, what parts of his life can we actually confirm with public records? Well, the answer is pretty unexpected.
It's wild. While his professional history was erased, his personal life has recently become a very public record. Court documents confirm he was married, then he married his wife's friend, and now he's actually in court facing polygamy charges. A source even described him as living a complete double life, a theme that, you gotta admit, echoes the secrecy of his professional past. The man whose career was hidden from the public was apparently hiding his life from his own family, too. And that really leaves us with this final critical question. The story of Brandon Beak isn't just about one officer's misconduct or his bizarre personal drama. It's about a system that allowed a public record of serious wrongdoing to be totally wiped clean. And it really makes you wonder, if a past like this can be officially erased, how can the trust between a community and its police ever truly be rebuilt?